Skin Deep, written and narrated by Saffron Bryant. Chapter 13. Ravyn's teeth clattered together as she sat in the tray of a rusted truck that bumped over the rough road. Grumpy and Doc stood to either side of her like bodyguards, while Leaky sat at the back, leaving a trail of oil behind them. People lined the sides of the roads, some waving and cheering, others staring with open mouths. At first it had just been a few, but as they drew closer to the city, the road became packed with people, all craning to see the new queen. Snippets of conversation drifted on the breeze to Ravyn's ears. "The new queen? She can't be. Look at all that dirt. I heard she has an army of robots that do her bidding. Why is she riding with those ugly brutes? Filthy. Her scars make her look so rugged, totally tough. I think they're disgusting. Back in my day, such scars were covered up so we didn't have to look at them. If she had any courtesy, she'd be wearing a veil. Glad I didn't vote for her." Ravyn shook her head and instead focused on the city rising in the distance. More people lined the walls and colored ribbons flew from the towers. She laid a hand on the gun at her waist. The cool metal felt good against her fingertips. She took a deep breath and straightened her back as the gate approached. The truck rumbled through the city proper, where people crowded the main thoroughfare. Undesirables wearing masks stood at the back. They didn't gossip or mumble to one another. Instead, they raised their right hands and ran their fingers down the sides of their faces, in the same places where Ravyn's scars were. She swallowed. It felt too much like a salute. Closer to the castle, the bodies pressed together so tightly that the truck had to slow to a crawl. People stretched out and tried to touch Ravyn, their cold hands brushing over her skin and clothes. Her throat went dry and a cold chill tingled at the back of her neck. "We have to keep moving," she hissed to Doc. "We can't go any faster, not without running people over." A bead of sweat dribbled down Ravyn's forehead, leaving a cold trail. "Maybe we should consider it." "I don't—" Doc's reply was cut short by a raw scream. The crowd surged forward and the stroking hands became snatching claws. Rough fingers grabbed Ravyn's arms and pulled her to the side of the truck. "No!" She kicked her legs and strained to reach her gun, but they had her arms pinned. Doc spun and reached for her hand, but was too slow. Grumpy aimed his gun, but whoever had hold of Ravyn held her in front like a shield. They yanked her over the side of the truck and into the crowd. People yelled at one another, their voices becoming muffled roar in her ears. The press of bodies squeezed against her, pushing the air from her lungs. She gasped and wriggled to get free, but the firm hands tightened, sending pain through her arms. "Get her inside! Bitch kicked me! The queen will be pleased." They tugged Ravyn away from the truck until the crowd blocked any sight of Doc and Grumpy. She wriggled harder, pulling her arms to the point of breaking. Her fingers brushed against the hilt of her gun and she tugged it. It came loose but tumbled out of her fingers. "Not bloody likely!" The man behind her slammed an elbow into her ribs, knocking the air from her lungs. She bent double, choking. "In here!" They pulled Ravyn into a dark room and slammed the door shut behind them. Stale smells and dust filled the air. Ravyn gasped, and dust scratched the back of her throat, making her cough and choke. Dribble flew out of her mouth and coated her chin. "She's like a bloody animal," a man said, shoving her down a set of stairs. She stumbled into a dark tunnel, thick arms holding her tight. Her injured leg ached, the agony growing with every limping step forward. They pushed her to go faster, jabbing fingers into her ribs. She hobbled for what felt like hours, being prodded and poked every few moments. By the time the floor sloped upwards, she was sure she would die from the pain in her leg. Light spilled down through an open doorway, revealing a glistening room beyond. Ravyn squinted against the light and held a shaking hand over her face. Marble tiles lined the floor, silver veins sparkling. Broad columns rose up in grand arches, carved with flowers and beautiful faces. Colorful tapestries lined the walls, interspersed with glowing screens showing images of the queen. The guards shoved Ravyn to the center of the room, slamming hard sticks against the backs of her legs so that she collapsed to the ground. She landed hard on her knees, the pain jolting through her still injured leg. She winced and struggled to get up, but firm hands held her down. "Well, well, well, look what we have here." Queen Elena swept out from behind a column, her long dress brushing against the marble tiles, rustling. Ravyn clenched her jaw and straightened her back. The queen stopped and looked down her nose at Ravyn, her eyes like crystals of ice. "So nice of you to join me, finally." Ravyn stared straight back at her. "As the new queen, I demand you let me go, or you'll be charged with treason." Queen Elena threw back her head, and her high-pitched laughter echoed from the ceiling. She looked around at the guards and raised an eyebrow. "Would any of you here like to arrest me? Any of you interested in following this abomination?" The guards shook their heads. The queen nodded and turned back to Ravyn with a predatory smile. "I think you'll find these fine people know the proper order of things. They'll be no help to you." Ravyn's stomach tightened and her gaze flicked to the door. Inside, she kicked herself. She'd known it was a trap, that the queen wouldn't let her win, and yet she'd come anyway. She shouldn't have ever tried. But she couldn't accept that either. "What do you want with me?" Ravyn asked, her voice shaking. "I want to show you, and the people, that your ridiculous ways will never work. People respect beauty. They always have, and your rebellion can't change that. Let me tell you something, Ravyn Aldun. Image is influence. Nothing else matters." Ravyn's hands clenched into fists. "You're wrong. People believed in me. They followed me." "No, you had a few robot supporters and a few malcontent undesirables. That's not a movement. It's not a following. At best, it's a poor delusion." "You're wrong." The queen smiled. "Really? Keep that in mind. I'll ask you again later if you still believe it. Something tells me you're going to have a change of heart." "My friends still have the Calanto. If you do anything to me, you'll never see it. How long will you stay in power then?" The queen narrowed her eyes at Ravyn and her lips twisted. "Do you think I'm an idiot? I've found a safer way to transport what I need, where the kingdom can't be held ransom for terrorists. Oh no, that trick won't work twice." Queen Elena whipped her face from Ravyn and bellowed to the surrounding guards. "Prepare the cameras and bring me the knife." The chamber burst into a flurry of activity as another guard laid a hand on Ravyn's shoulder and others rushed to the sides, dragging a camera and a table to the queen's side. A knife, the length of Ravyn's forearm, lay on the table, jagged edge glinting. Heat prickled across Ravyn's face and she swallowed. The queen's smile widened as she took the knife and held it up to the light. "Frightening, isn't it? Don't worry, I know just what I'm doing." Queen Elena closed the distance to Ravyn and laid the knife against her forehead. "Is the camera recording?" "Yes, my lady." "Good. As soon as I make the first cut, start the polls. I want a running tally on the main screen." "Of course, my lady." Queen Elena met Ravyn's eyes once more and grimaced before pressing more firmly on the blade. It cut through the skin on Ravyn's forehead, the tip scraping her skull. Ravyn howled in agony as a hot burn spread across her forehead. She writhed, attempting to rip her head away, but the guards held her in place, a pair of hands clamping her skull like a vice. Hot blood trickled down her forehead, dripping in front of her eyes and landing on her cheeks where it continued, flowing down her face. Pain pulsed through her head in time with her heart, stinging like hot coals. The queen smiled and dragged the knife sideways. The blade tore through Ravyn's flesh, widening the gash and lifting the agony to new levels. Ravyn screamed as tears burned the corners of her eyes, mixing with the blood. Crimson droplets fell into her eyes, blurring her vision and stinging like small fires. She squeezed her eyes shut and clenched her teeth. "Oh, don't close your eyes now," Queen Elena purred. "How will you keep track of the new poll?" The pressure of the knife pulled away, and Ravyn forced her eyes open, blinking away the bloody tears. A screen the size of a small car took up most of the far wall. One half showed Ravyn, kneeling on the floor covered in blood, with the Queen standing over her, immaculate. The other half showed a graph with 2 bars. One labelled Queen Elena, the other labelled Ravyn. Ravyn's heart twisted. Her bar was dropping fast, while Queen Elena's climbed steadily. What? I warned you. Despite what you and your pathetic followers think, looks do matter. Even now the fools who voted for you are changing over, now they've seen what you're becoming. Ravyn shook her head, flinging blood across the floor. No, it can't be. The voting is finished. You can't hold a new one. The Queen's face darkened and she hefted the knife into Ravyn's field of view. Until your coronation, I'm Queen. And as Queen, it's my right to make the rules. Clearly, the people agree. But you're hurting me like a common criminal. Doesn't that make them pause? Don't they care? Clearly, they recognize that beauty is far more important than your precious character. That's how it's always been and how it will always be. People don't see past skin deep. The sooner you realize that, the better it will be for everyone. Ravyn's lips quivered. The pain from her forehead disappeared beneath a wave of pain from her heart. She'd done everything for the people, to change things, and they turned on her like a pack of rabid dogs. All because of a cut on her forehead? How could she have ever imagined changing things when the people didn't want to change? The Queen's mouth twisted. Ah, you're finally beginning to understand. Unfortunately, they saw your initial scars as roguish, attractive. Fools. At least now they see the truth, how disgusting you really are. Ravyn hung her head, unable to watch the screen any longer. Don't worry, dear, the Queen said, taking a fistful of Ravyn's hair and twisting her head. I'm far from done with you. End chapter. Be sure to like and subscribe so you'll know when a new chapter is released.